Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome grade 12 economics students to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling an absolutely massive, high-scoring section of your syllabus, Chapter 5. We are talking all about protectionism and free trade. You know, if you've ever wondered how countries actually fight for economic survival, or why certain foreign goods cost exactly what they do when they cross our borders, well, this is it. Today, we're not just memorizing concepts. We are building your ultimate exam playbook to make sure you absolutely crush your final paper. Here's our masterclass agenda for today. We'll start with 1, foundations of global trade, then 2, shaping trade, export and import, 3, protectionism versus free trade, 4, South Africa's trade policies, and finally, 5, exam technique and summary. All right, Section 1, foundations of global trade, mastering the core vocabulary. Let's move to it and see how this all builds together. Let's start with the two opposing forces of global economics. Protectionism is, well, it's basically like putting up a giant shield around your country. It involves government policies designed specifically to benefit and protect local producers from foreign competition. But, in stark contrast, free trade is throwing those doors wide open. It means having very few barriers to international trade, allowing the completely free flow of goods and services without any government interference. So it's essentially the closed approach versus the open approach.
Now, if a government decides they want to be protectionist, they need some weapons to enforce it. The primary tools they use are, first, a tariff, which is just a tax slapped directly onto imported goods, instantly making them more expensive. Then there's a quota, which is a strict physical limit on the actual quantity of imports allowed in. And finally, a subsidy, which is direct financial support handed straight from the government to local producers to help them compete. You need to memorize these 3 distinct mechanisms. You will absolutely need them for the exam.
So the crucial point here is understanding why a government even uses those tools. And there are 2 massive reasons. First is dumping. This is a highly destructive, really aggressive practice where a country takes its surplus goods and sells them in a foreign country at a price that's actually below what it costs to make them. It literally destroys local competition. Second, we have infant industries. Think of these as brand new, struggling local businesses that desperately need a temporary shield, a protective barrier, so they can actually grow and survive against giant, well-established foreign competitors.
Moving on to Section 2, shaping trade, the 2 major trade policies.
These 2 macroeconomic policies pull in completely opposite directions. Export promotion looks outward. It's all about giving incentives to your local businesses so they actively produce goods specifically to sell to the rest of the world. Import substitution, on the other hand, looks inward. That's the strategy of taking goods you used to import from other countries and replacing them with goods produced right at home by domestic workers.
Let's break down export promotion first. How do governments actually pull this off? Well, by offering direct subsidies, transport concessions, export credit guarantees, setting up export processing zones, and negotiating some truly brilliant trade agreements like AGOA and SADC, which give South Africa access to huge foreign markets. And the benefits? They're incredible. It drives export-led economic growth, massively enlarges production capacity, brings in that vital foreign exchange, and creates a ton of jobs. But you know, examiners love to ask for the downsides too. Keep in mind that subsidies can distort the real cost of production. Plus, if you push your exports too aggressively, powerful overseas competitors might just retaliate and hit you with their own tariffs.
On the flip side, we have import substitution. Governments make this happen by rolling out the protectionist tools we just talked about: tariffs, quotas, exchange controls, embargoes, and strict local content requirements. The big, obvious benefit here is that it protects local industries and creates domestic employment. I mean, if we make it here, we employ people here, right? But there is a serious catch. This inward-looking approach almost always leads to higher prices for the average domestic consumer, overall economic inefficiency, and a dangerous lack of global competition. Without those foreign rivals keeping them on their toes, local companies might just get a bit lazy.
Let's jump into Section 3, protectionism versus free trade, the great economic debate. And this brilliantly illustrates the full arsenal of protectionist methods you need to know. Tariffs act as a tax that raises prices and immediately lowers the demand for imports. Quotas put a physical limit on imports, which reduces supply and artificially drives up prices. Subsidies give financial aid so local firms can undercut foreign competitors on price. Anti-dumping duties step in to penalize that malicious foreign pricing we discussed. Then there's an embargo, which is basically the nuclear option, a complete ban that stops trade entirely with a specific country. Finally, exchange controls limit the amount of foreign currency available, which effectively restricts businesses from being able to buy imports in the first place. You have to be able to explain the specific technical impact of each of these.
So, let's weigh the actual arguments here. Why choose protectionism? Well, because you need to protect those infant industries, stop that malicious dumping, and stabilize local employment. And what's really incredible here is the South African context. We also use protectionism to protect our unique natural resources and indigenous knowledge. For example, South Africa actively protects rooibos tea and the hoodia plant, so definitely use those specific examples in your essays. But why favor free trade? Because it maximizes comparative advantage, meaning countries focus on what they do best. It achieves economies of scale, lowers prices for everyday consumers, massively increases your choices at the store, and forces global innovation through sheer competition.
All right, Section 4, South Africa's trade policies, evaluating the desirable mix. Okay, listen up, because this brings us to a hot question. This is exactly the type of high-stakes, high-mark scenario examiners absolutely love. Because foreign trade makes up roughly 30% of South Africa's entire GDP, they don't just want you to regurgitate theory, they want you to evaluate the effectiveness of export promotion and import substitution specifically in South Africa. When you see a prompt like this, you've got to wake up, look at the global landscape, and explain exactly how South Africa navigates it.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing how South Africa's strategy actually maps out in the real world. We don't just pick one extreme or the other. We participate in the World Trade Organization to facilitate global free trade. We leverage massive alliances like BRICS and the African Union. And regionally, we use SADC and the Southern African Customs Union for duty-free access right here in our own backyard. The ultimate goal is what economists like to call the desirable mix. It's this delicate balancing act, embracing free trade to stay globally competitive, while simultaneously deploying strategic protectionism to nurture our infant industries, protect jobs, and ensure national security.
Section 5. Exam Technique and Summary. This is your ultimate cheat code.
If Chapter 5 pops up as your Section C essay, here is exactly how you structure it for maximum points. Step 1, your introduction. Define both protectionism and free trade clearly, verbatim. Step 2, the body. Methodically explain every single protection method we covered, contrast export promotion with import substitution, and sprinkle in those fantastic essay examples like AGO, SADC, and rooibos. Step 3, the additional part. This is where you evaluate essays' desirable mix or heavily argue your case based on whatever the prompt asks. And finally, Step 4, your conclusion. Don't just fade out, summarize it all with a clear, definitive economic stance.
For Sections A and B, your strategy needs to be sharp and simple. Section A requires absolute precision. You must know those definitions word for word. No guessing. For Section B, examiners are going to throw trade data or a balance of payments extract at you to interpret. Look closely at the numbers. Use real data points like knowing foreign trade is 30% of SA's GDP to confidently justify whether the economy is leaning open or closed. Show them you know your stuff.
All right, here is your final revision checklist. Before you even think about walking into that exam hall, you need to be able to define the core concepts, distinguish the tools, explain dumping and infant industries, contrast the inward and outward policies, list the heavy-hitting arguments for both sides, and know your acronyms: GATT, WTO, CDAC, AGOA, and BRICS. Honestly, go ahead and pause the explainer right here if you need to, and just test yourself on each of these points.
Before we go, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought that pushes you just a bit beyond your textbook. As you write your exams, ask yourself, how is rapid globalization and the rise of entirely digital economies going to impact the desirable mix of South Africa's trade policies tomorrow? Think about it. Will traditional tariffs even work in a world dominated by digital services? Keep that critical economic mindset alive. Thank you so much for joining me on this Explainer Grade 12s. Stay focused, master that desirable mix, and best of absolute luck on your exams. You've got this for sure.